What you are about to listen to is only a part of the story of the last deployment, detailing the end of the West's direct involvement in Afghanistan, an endeavor which lasted near 20 years. The steady then rapid withdrawal of military forces, culminating in the evacuation from Hamid Karzai International Airport in August 2021, is a scenario echoed from our past, but it is in itself an entirely unique story that at once exposes both the brokenness of humanity and reveals its beautiful potential. For months, weeks, days, men and women from around the world came to give hope and life where both soon were in short supply. These stories are recorded and shared for their sake, for their families, and for posterity.
We got all of our gear fully loaded up, main pack, day pack, flak. I think our flaks were already on, all ready to rock and roll. We were all condition one. And they start disembarking on the plane, and I go to start running off, or I guess we were jogging off, just quickly trying to get off the plane. And I get out, and it's a beautiful morning. It's like 85 degrees. It was pretty quiet. There was no real action going on. You could hear some distant gun firing over what we later found out was Northgate, mostly warning shots from Marines, and there was occasional machine gun fire coming from different points around the airport firing in. But ultimately, it was pretty quiet. Really nice weather out. And it was really surreal because you building up, getting ready for worst case scenario, and you get out and it's just chill. People are just walking around. It feels like a normal airport, except that it's only like a handful of military personnel walking around. There was few civilians at the airport terminals getting checked in. I mean, it was really quiet. There was nothing going on. We were all really I don't know if we were all really I was very confused. And our company commander, Major Mortensen, he went to go talk to some people. He ended up securing somewhere for us to put our gear and kind of sleep and things like that. So there was like I guess it was like a reception. It was like a temporary reception hall kind of thing for, I guess, international dignitaries and things like that. I just remember seeing a stage with a whole bunch of flags on it, and there was like an electronics shop in the same thing. We got putting up in there with, I think it was combat cargo and logistics. We got put up in the same sleeping area as them. And, we'd hear an occasional shot fly over the terminal. Nothing crazy, but, I mean, you're still not used to being in a hostile area, so you're still jumpy at everything. And then our first role that we were given was QRF team for just being regular quick reaction in the area. So we were doing, I think, a 25% security, where we just had 25% of the guys ready to rock and roll, and then the rest of us were just kind of chilling in the general area, doing what they got to do, clean weapons, barely at all. They really didn't want you taking your rifle apart, getting your equipment ready, things like that. Just kind of being productive, but just kind of just hanging out. And then we got a call that everyone had to stand up and stand by, where they essentially had told us that a horde of refugees had broken in and that they were making their way to the mess hall. They were about to ransack the mess hall. We'd gotten all of our gear on, gotten into columns of two, and just started taking off down to where the mess hall area was and run past everybody. I mean, there was Turks walking around. There was, I don't remember, I guess there was other Marines walking around still. I don't remember if there was, I don't think that the airborne had showed up yet. I don't think that the Brits had showed up yet. They might have. There might have been a few Brits walking around, some paratroopers, but I don't quite remember, just because we were just running through the streets. And we were just running down the road, and we get to the mess hall, and we're all kitted up, ready to go, ready to fight people back. And there's just two lines of people standing waiting. Most of them are uniformed. People have badges, and they're all just looking at us like really confused. And we're looking around really confused because we were expecting, just like a massive riot of people coming through, and there was nobody. Everyone's just confused, just looking at each other. And so we start like kind of walking around the building trying to find people. And our XO comes up to the company, and it just goes, "Hey, everybody." So there was a misunderstanding. What they really wanted was they wanted two Marines to stand at the end of the chow line and make sure people aren't taking more than 2 drinks. So we were like, are you kidding right now? So I think they took a few guys from 3rd Platoon and a few guys from 1st Platoon, and they did a rotation to make sure people weren't taking too many drinks, because people were taking like 4 drinks at once and they should only take 2. So we were like, what the fuck is happening? Because after seeing the reports on the news and hearing the engagement and watching the floods of people, we were expecting just absolute bedlam, and it was an absolutely mundane morning. Like, people were just hanging out, talking, drinking Dr. Pepper, and just walking around, just literally nothing. There were still vendors open selling food. Like, it was, you wouldn't even know that it was a collapsing country around you. So we're all slightly embarrassed for looking like a bunch of idiots running out into the street like that. We all walk back to the cover, to the like pavilion thing that we're set up in, and we wait there for a couple hours. I don't think we slept there that night. I think that was our first night, our first actual defensive post. They had taken us to the far side of the runway, and we were going to lay in the defense overnight because they had found where most of the people had flooded in from the day before. We were just supposed to watch it to make sure that nobody else comes through, and if anyone else does come, just detain them. I think the Turks or maybe the ANA were going to show up and escort them out. So yeah, we left our main packs. They said just take the gear that you need for 24 hours. I don't even think we took assault packs with us. I think we just took the stuff on our backs. Just flax, I think some chow boxes and stuff. I can't quite remember what got brought. But yeah, we got into a Ranger file and just started walking across the airport, and it got cut in half because I think it was like me and one guy in front of me had to stop, and then the rest of I was like right at the halfway point of the formation. We had to stop because another plane was landing. But then instead of stopping us, he like stopped us, and then he saw that it was like a good like minute or two before it was actually going to land. So he's just like, just go quick, just don't get hit by the plane. We're like, okay. So we just like ran across the runway trying to see if we could get the whole company across before the plane landed. I think they ended up having to stop at like 3rd Platoon. Maybe, I think 3rd Platoon was leading, and I think 1st Platoon and headquarters were taking the rear. Could be wrong. But I just remember 2nd Platoon got put in the middle. So we're on the far side of the one runway strip. We started hearing bullet cracks, and then we started hearing bullet whizzes. And one of the lieutenants yelled out, "Contact left," and we all just started fucking running because there's nowhere to take cover. There's no, we can't see where the fire's coming from. We had specific orders to not return fire unless you can determine exactly where the fire is coming from. We just knew it was coming from one of the hotels, and we weren't allowed to return fire, especially because it was like, I don't know, 700 yards away. It was far out there. So we start just trying to sprint to, there was like a small, I guess it was like must have been some kind of, it was a small concrete building with a small tower and a fence around it. We were just trying to run to that cover. And, CO yells out, "Stop running, and don't run, just walk, don't run." And come to find out later what it was is they had Dishkas mounted up in the hotels, and they were shooting at the incoming planes. And but at their ranges, I guess they couldn't see if they were hitting or not. And I assume they didn't want us running because they didn't want to be able to see that they were getting close because people were reacting to it. But yeah, we took Dishka fire on our first day there, going to set into a defense. And then I just remember, sprinting with all the gear that I had on me, and just thinking, I was like, man, I should have worked out more. I'm not cut out for this combat shit. This shit is fucking ass. Heart's pounding, and just running full force, and then having to stop. Yeah, we just kept on walking. We ended up getting the whole company across the runway, and from there we go to this small access road that runs parallel to, I guess it was, I don't know, it was some kind of smaller terminal. I think it was more, not necessarily domestic flights, but more like regional flights. I remember seeing planes that were listed for Pakistan flight companies and other Middle Eastern and Eastern Mediterranean countries. Like, I think Lithuania was one of them. We'd seen a few personnel milling around. I don't know if we ever identified them. I can't quite remember. But I think there might have been a few random civilians walking around in the closed down, like, regional airports. ANA showed up and kind of kicked them out. And yeah, so we had set up along this access road. It was like, it was more of like a taxiway to these smaller terminals. And they'd spread the whole company out, just laying in the prone for probably every, I don't know, 5 feet, and just lay down in the prone. They were just like, just lay in the prone and just watch. They're like, we're not going to be here long enough for you to dig a fighting hole or anything like that. Just lay in the dirt. Yeah, we laid in the dirt for like, it's like 18 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours, something like that. At first, we were on 100% security, and things started kind of getting into the groove of it. So then we ended up moving down to like 50% security. But on that side of the airport, I guess I can't quite think logistically what would have been on the other side. I believe it was just access to Kabul itself, but they had the ANA, basically counterterrorism teams, were on that side of the airport, and they were contacting in like almost dedicated contact with the Taliban the whole night. And we were behind the buildings, but you could see the tracers going up in the air. You could hear the gunfire going off, and you'd hear the occasional like rifle bullet crack overhead from, clearing over the building and stuff. There was like no cover where we were at. It was just, you just lay in the dirt and just wait. There was a small observation building, I guess, that was supposed to observe the taxiways. They had snipers set up on top of that. There was some cargo containers behind in there in that small little, like, I wouldn't even say compound area, but it was just like a fenced in area around the building. And there was like a gravel pile. We ended up starting to do like a sleep rotation in and around that building and around the gravel pile and things like that. Broke into the storage containers to check out what was going on in there. And it was random stuff. There was flax, there was helmets, there was random electronic parts, there was all kinds of random stuff. And then in one of the containers, it was just people's clothes. And I guess it was all the stuff that they had collected up off the runway from when it got overtaken. They just thrown into this storage container just to clear it up. So we had spent the night there. We had reports of a number of Taliban. I can't even remember. I don't know, somewhere between like 5 to 7, or maybe a few more, had entered a building further down the line. We had sent the reports up. It was way too far out for us to worry about, and basically just called it up to the counterterrorism teams. They just showed up with like, I think it was like 3 or 4 Hiluxes full of dudes, and they just went in and cleared the building, and they ended up killing everyone that was in there. I think that they had confirmed that there was an RPG team in there that had broken into the airport. The whole time they just had us sitting in the in the defense, just doing nothing. There was a report later on in the night. I was on a sleep cycle. I got woken up to it. They said, everyone get on the line. People are breaking in. I couldn't even tell you what time it was. It was dark. It had been dark for a while. There was a report that 14 people had gotten into the airport. They had sent off, I think, a good portion of first platoon to go and handle it because they were the closest, and we had spread everyone down and filled in the ranks. And they just kind of came walking back, and they were like, "Yeah, the A&A guys got there before us, and they just beat the living piss out of everybody that was there, women, kids, everybody." And they'd said that some 14-year-old kid, he had gotten scooped up by the A&A. They were going to hand him over to the guys, and they were like, "Do you want to execute him?" They were like, "No." And they were like, "Can we?" And they're like, "No." They're like, what do we do with him? They're just like, just take him outside the fucking wall, let him go. And apparently they just kind of took him around a building on the far side, and the guy said that they heard one gunshot, and then all the freaking A&A guys just came walking back. Yeah, I mean that was night one. So we had sat up in this in the defense, and they ended up letting us kind of go to sleep a little bit, but we had to go to sleep in place. So I just kind of just in the prone with my rifle, I just kind of put my head into my frickin' rifle and fell asleep. Well, through that whole area, they're like big roly-polies, like half an inch or more. And I woke up and they were all crawling inside my helmet and all down my back in my flak and everything. I knew I couldn't take my shit off because of how close we were to engagements. But I'm like, there's like a dozen of these beetles in my fucking shit. So I'm just sitting there, just smacking my helmet, like to the point where I'm getting a headache, trying to knock these things out of my helmet. And I feel this tingling in my sleeve, and I flick it, and like I thought it was a lizard. Like this 3-inch thing is laying on the ground, and I shine my red light on it, and it's this like 3-inch long millipede that was just crawling in my sleeve. And I was so mad. But that was like right in the morning. That was like right when the sun came up. And we had seen guys were coming up to us in tan camis. We were all in green camis. So we were kind of confused. And, they'd let us know. They were like, "Hey, 2-1 just showed up. They're here to reinforce." And we're like, "Oh, thank God." They're like, "Yeah, they're going to take over this section." And I think the 82nd guys came up with them too. That was when we started seeing some of the stolen vehicles, people hotwiring cars and trucks and shit and stealing them. I think a couple of the 82nd guys showed up in stolen trucks. And yeah, they were like, "Hey, yeah, we're relieved. We're heading back." We're like, "Thank God." So then we head back. We hike back. We get back to the rear area. And I don't even know how much time we spent there, but not long after that, towards the evening time, I believe it was, we got sent up the road to North Gate. That was the first gate that we had held security on. And so we had worked our way up. That was when we started seeing the process of getting civilians into the airport and how it was going to be operated and things like that. So they were basically like, "Hey, yeah, Alpha Company's stretched thin. They've been running this for a long time. We're going to go and relieve for them while they get some rest." So I think at that point, first platoon had been out there for a little bit already, and we were just going to reinforce them. They were basically the ones that did the start of the transition with Alpha Company. So we had gone and caught up with them, and they gave us kind of the rundown of what was going on. The people who were inside the gates and the walls and stuff were pretty docile. They were pretty chill. You kind of talk to them. They were more respondent, things like that. But as you started getting closer and closer to the gate, people were getting a little bit more hysterical as they had just gotten in. And we finally got to the gate. And, at that point, you're walking over all kinds of garbage, just people's clothes and shoes and suitcases and bags filled with who knows what. And you're just walking all over this stuff, going over concrete barriers and stuff, just things that were set up to try to slow people down. Yeah, we get to the gate, and they let us out, and we kind of walk up the way a little bit, and there's this big clearing just full of just garbage, and it's blocked off by like 2 rows of sea wire and a bunch of dudes there, and you just look out and there's just an absolute sea of people just screaming and yelling. And the closer we were getting to the gate, the louder the gunshots were getting, and you'd hear the explosions from flashbangs going off, and you could start smelling a little bit of CS that had been used in the past and things like that. So it started becoming more and more like nerve-wracking the closer you got, because you're just slowly walking to it, but you can hear it getting closer and closer. You can hear people yelling and screaming, and nothing's coherent. It's just a mass of people yelling, and you get out there and it's just an absolute mob of people. And this whole time everyone was condition 1 the whole time. We get out there and they're just like, hey, look out for people in the crowd and stuff, look for suspicious characters and things like that, like you always know how to do. But you also at the same time have to look out at the buildings out in the crowd, look for snipers, make sure people aren't gonna, you're not gonna have an AK pop out of the window and just start shooting at everybody and stuff. So there was probably about, at any one time, maybe about 30 of us, maybe 40, holding behind the sea wire. There was maybe about like 6 people over at where they were removing the sea wire, kind of working it as a gate, just to try to keep people at bay. And the rest of us were all just kind of spaced out, almost arm's distance from each other. And you're basically just making sure people don't come over the sea wire. You're watching the wall, down the wall, making sure people aren't trying to climb the wall. At this point, they were trying to use warning shots for a while, but they realized they were running through so much ammo doing that, because there were so many people that you'd fire a warning shot and they would be jarred for like a second, and then the people behind them would push them, and then it would just keep going. So they ended up denying the ability to use warning shots because of ammo conservation, because getting people in was hard enough, let alone all the additional supplies required. It got to the point where Alpha Company and stuff were just raiding the different armories in the airport to try to use any of the weapons that they could get a hold of. RPKs, and guys had AKs, and all kinds of random shit that was just whatever they could find. We were told it was only going to be a couple hours we were going to be there, and it turned into pretty much the whole night that we were there. What would happen is we would try to set up a way for us to only allow in maybe 12 people. Try to keep families together, let like 12 people through at one time. They'd get to the, down the way, they'd get anyone who needs medical attention would get it. They'd take everyone to the search tents, try to search them within like a minute or two, and then let the next wave through and the next wave through. But the problem would be is that you'd let like 12 people in, and then like 1,000 people would try to push in. You just had to shut it down until everyone calmed down enough that you could let in 12 people, and then it would just restart again. And so instead of us being able to process maybe like in an hour, maybe be able to process like 200 people, in an hour we might maybe be able to process like 20. And as you stop letting people through, people get more antsy and aggressive, and like every imaginable scenario you can think in your head of people trying to not necessarily like fuck with you, but like every imaginable and trained scenario of interactions with people in a hostile environment is what we were dealing with. You'd have actual threats. I mean, we had trucks of Taliban driving by shooting AKs in the air. Not all the time while we were there. Probably about like 2 or 3 times it happened. They would just drive through just into the fucking air. Then, you'd have people run up with backpacks, and they're only 6 feet away, just on the other side of the sea wire, and they're reaching in their bag, going to pull something out. You don't know what it's some arbitrary piece of paper that they printed out from somewhere, or, some random driver's license that they're trying to show you or something like that. People would run up to the sea wire just to try to get a rise out of you. People were trying to antagonize you. People were getting annoyed and frustrated and things like that. They would get so frustrated, they would just sit down at the edge of the sea wire and you tell them to get back and they wouldn't fucking respond or listen, or you'd point your rifle at them. They would just fucking ignore you. And they would only respond when you actually like put the laser and like put it on their chest or on their forehead. And then like other people would like kind of pick them up, move them away. We had to hold an extra security further away from the sea wire, because what would happen is people would stand like a foot out of the sea wire. Everyone would run up behind them and just push them into the sea wire, and then you'd have like a shitload of people stuck in the sea wire, and then they're getting all trampled into it. So then we'd have to like get everyone to get back, and only so many people spoke English. I mean, a lot of them were able to speak enough English to be able to understand, and you point a rifle at somebody, they usually get the idea. And that kind of set the pace, though. And it was just people running up and yelling about their kid, had been trampled to death, or their wife was pregnant, someone in the back was giving birth, or something like that. Some kid would come up crying to you because his parents were both shot, like just gone, and there was just nothing you could do. And they were all looking to you for help or to do something, but there's nothing you can do. On top of that, the minute you go to try to help somebody, the minute you try to give some kind of assistance, you would just get absolutely flooded with people. Like the second they were like, what documents do I need? The second you give them an answer, literally 200 to 300 people would crowd around you, just trying to get any kind of answers. And, not being able to make any promises to people, things like that. It was just constant, just dismay the whole time. It was World War Z the whole time. You would just, over the course of the time we were there, you just slowly get numb to it. It got to the point where, like, towards the end, people were literally in tears getting sent out of the gate because they didn't have the proper stuff, and they're trying to plead with you, and you're like, you don't got the right stuff. Sorry. You got to go back, because you're just so burnt out from hearing every possible story. I mean, people would tell you a story, you've already heard it from 40 other people, regardless if it's true or not. They're trying to, the shock and awe, they're trying to get you to try to help them. You've already heard it, 100 times, 1,000 times. And even the people who got into the gate didn't mean that they were leaving. I remember not long after we got sent, when we got pulled off in North Gate, well, there was also a lot of injuries too. Not necessarily to U.S. personnel, but like the civilians started doing this thing where, in order for us to get them to calm down, we would pull out, like a flashbang or something like that, and just show it to them, like finger in the ring, ready to pull it. So that way they would kind of calm, because half the time you'd pull it out, show it to them, they knew what it was, everyone would kind of calm down, at least in the general vicinity, which was enough for you to be like, okay, now let's try to reorganize this. But then after a while, what they would start doing is they'd start picking up their kids and lifting their kids into the air, basically as almost like human shields, because they knew we weren't going to want to throw these flashbangs into kids. But there was a good portion of the time they would do that, but someone else had already thrown one into the air, and then they're lifting these kids up into like the blast area of these flashbangs, and then we were having to pick out all of the shrapnel, like the little foil shrapnel, out of these kids' faces. And it was babies with blown out eardrums and just really messed up stuff that wasn't even necessarily the fault of, I mean, there's a lot of blame to be put in a lot of places, but instances like that, it's almost, you can't even, there's so much going on, you can't even put blame on anything, just because you can't even keep track of what's going on. There was an elderly man who, there was a concussion grenade that had a delay in its fuse. It ended up hitting him in the chest, and it blew his whole chest open. He ended up getting a really fatal sucking chest wound, and ended up just dying right there at the gate. And I mean, it was not common for somebody to be killed because of that. But as the days went on, more and more people started, being injured and dying from heat stroke and stray bullets from the Taliban. shooting at them as they're climbing on walls or on cars or something like that. People getting trampled, little kids getting trampled. And then they'd be dead, and the parents would just leave them there. Take the rest of the kids that they still have and just go try to get into the gate. As the days went on, it just became worse and worse and worse as more and more people showed up, and there was orphan kids and all kinds of just mayhem everywhere. The water had stopped working at one point, so the porta shitters were just completely filled within like 2 or 3 days. We ended up making a rule where it was only women were allowed to use the porta shitters to, try to pee, because there was nowhere else for anyone to go. People were intentionally hurting their kids to try to get medical attention, to try to, they would like dislocate their 6-year-old's arm to try to get medical attention to get in the gate. Military-aged single men were like abducting kids to pose as single fathers, and then when they'd get in the gate, they would just dump the kid off and just go try to figure out a way to get on a plane. And then we ended up getting this mass of like orphaned kids that we just had to put on a bus and send to the orphanage. We don't know if they're where their parents were, if they're still in the country or not. We had a kid who came in with his family. The family just abandoned him at the gate. They went on to the plane, and we assumed they took off on a plane, or they tried to take off on a plane. We got separated, and it was just constant things like that. We had wall jumpers, people jumping over the wall. When I had first got put on Eastgate, that was the gate we got put on most. I had originally got put on the search tents. I was on the male search tents. Most of the stuff we were looking for, they were non-combatants, so a lot of the guys were getting frustrated and treating them more like they were Taliban. And I had to remind a couple of the guys a couple of times that, hey, they're still civilians. Like the search practices you learned and stuff don't really apply right now because they are still civilians. And people kind of got the hang of it in like a day or two, being a little bit more polite and nice. It's with everything going on, We had one dude, one of the first guys that got to the search tent. His whole face, like all down the front of his clothes were just covered in blood. There was blood all over him. And we were like, "Sir, do you need medical attention? Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. This ain't my blood." We're like, you just don't know how to respond to things like that. Most of the stuff we were looking for was basically just things that you weren't allowed to have in the U.S. and things you weren't allowed to take on a plane. So we were taking like razor blades and lighters and lipo batteries, and there was a lot of drugs. I at one point had pulled out of someone's luggage an entire shopping bag filled with ecstasy. It's just literally just so many hashish, heroin, opioids, everything you can imagine was just. And where we were at, it was basically the railway inlet to the airport. So we had ended up, there was a little trench, like a runoff trench off to the side. And we ended up just throwing everything in it. We just started calling it drug trench just because it was all the contraband just got thrown in there. It was just constant. Kids would come in crying. And we ended up holding on to pulling candy out of the MREs. The kids would come in all freaked out and crying. You just try to give them maybe some candy or try to calm them down or things like that. And it only works so much, but people were coming into the tents, and one dude he got into the tent and just, his head was spinning and he just keeled over and, his heart stopped. The corpsman was actually able to get him resuscitated, and it took several hours to get him back, but he ended up actually getting him back to a coherent state. Turned out both of his eardrums had been blown out by a flashbang, and he had some kind of concussion and things like that. He was really messed up, but they ended up getting him back to be at least somewhat lucid and being able to walk around on his own again. Kids would come in all banged up and beat up, and everybody. It was just constantly people trying to look out for just themselves the whole time. There was a few people who were they stuck behind to help us translate and things like that, or help us, hand out food and water and things like that. But most of the time, it was every man for himself anarchy. And there was just a few guys that we had to try to keep everything together. It was just day in and day out. I barely even remember when we got the chance to sleep or eat or drink water, do anything. Because any water that I would get, I just ended up handing out to people, which they would, half the time they would take 2-3 swigs out of it and just throw the whole unused water bottle out. So for first few days, I got put on that search tent security. And then I got pulled off of that, and they kind of were able to kind of run it on their own. They had a process down. And I got put on the road that connected Eastgate and Abbeygate. It was just a straight run road that went up to a watchtower that they had some of the, I think it was the 2-1 snipers guys were up in. I had originally gone to that post by myself just to kind of watch the road. And then I ended up just kind of becoming the NCO in charge of that run. As the days went on, as the evacs kept going, we started getting more and more of these jumpers. I think one of the nights, it was like the 24th or something like that. It was right before we got pulled off the wall. We had 54 detainees in one night where they would just jump over the wall. And I mean, because the problem was if you sent them back over the wall, all they would do is just run down, sprint like 200 yards away and just hop over in another spot. So you had to bring them in and then detain them, and then the Turks would take them over to Abbeygate and let them out. And then they would just try to break in somewhere else. So because they were civilians and we had no way of actually controlling the situation like that, all we could do was try to slow them down and do that. That was the same night that some guy had made it over the wall with an AK and got into firefights between Marines and A&A guys, and a couple of the A&A guys got shot. And I think the A&A guys were the ones who ultimately took down the gunman. But it was just bedlam day in and day out. We had the one night the air attack sirens went off. We were just scrambling. A couple of the guys jumped into that drug trench. Everyone's just trying to find. I mean, it's just a big concrete pad. There's nowhere to hide. So, I just laid down next to a railroad track and stuff like that. Nothing went off. I think someone had said that they had fired mortars and they were duds, and they just, hit the dirt and they just set off the sirens or something like that, or they never pulled the safety pins out or some dumb shit. But it was enough to set off the sirens. Yeah. I mean, I got real bad burnt out there. The night where we had all those detainees, I was cutting one of them free, and I put a knife through the webbing of my hand, so I had that all wrapped up. Mostly, not that it was a bad injury, mostly just because it was so unsanitary at that fucking airport. It was literally, people were just shitting in the middle of the road. People were just pissing all over the place. People would come in just soaked in their own piss. There was blood all over the place from people getting stepped on and cut, and people coming in with gunshot wounds and things like that. It was just every imaginable unsanitary situation was going on. People were just trying to do what they could. Eventually, we started closing down Eastgate after we'd been there for a while. We had heard reports that Northgate had closed also, which left only Abbeygate open. So we weren't taking any more people in. This was on like the 24th or something like that. This was like a day or two before we got pulled off. And we were just holding upper security. We'd started getting reports of VBIDs and suicide bombers in the area. And they were ISIS suicide bombers and things like that. So they had us up on the wall to make sure to try to scout out for these possible VBIDs. Because that was the worst case scenario, was a VBID right up against the concrete barrier walls. So we started holding that upper security and just trying to scout for it. And, every 15 minutes, every maybe 30 minutes, there'd always be some kind of report of a car that's broke down next to the wall, something that's with sagging suspension, some Taliban fighters rolling around on a moped. That, it was, I mean, it's literally in the middle of a city, and there's no perimeter anymore. I mean, there never really was a perimeter. We just tried to keep as much security as we could, but literally there was no place to hide. Yeah, we spent that whole morning. You still take a random sniper shot now and then. Some random, asshole with an AK out in the middle of town would shoot a burst off at you and things like that. It got to the point where they were just pot shots. Nobody even really was concerned about it. And then, the morning of the 26th, we got taken off. I think it was Charlie Company came and relieved us finally. We were out there for what was supposed to be a 12-hour shift, turned into 5 days. And then we came back for like 12 hours. And then we went back out for what was supposed to be another 12-hour shift, which turned into 3 days. And that was, that whole time we were basically operating with Weapons Company, holding down Eastgate. We'd done a little bit of work at the beginning with Abbey Gate, but then when 2-1 kind of showed up to reinforce, they held down Abbey Gate, and 82nd Airborne had a couple of light machine gun positions within the actual runway area. So they were kind of like our secondary, line of defense. But they were, the amount of people that there were and kind of how we had the flow going, they weren't ever really needed, but it was nice to have some extra eyes, kind of tell us when people were hopping the wall. And then we'd gone to back to the rear on the morning of the 26th. And we kind of finally got a chance to rest. They managed to get the water pressure back up. Apparently, when I think it was the Turks had pulled out, they'd gotten reports that the Taliban got a hold of Blue Gear and that they were able to monitor like the battalion level comms, and they all just freaked out and just decided to leave. And apparently on their way out, for some reason, they destroyed the water plant, and we had no water pressure. We managed to get it back up and working enough that when we got back, we were able to take cold showers, and just all of the gunk that was on everyone's bodies from dealing with the crowds for the last 10 days was just coming off, and it was just black gray water running off everybody. Dudes still had dried up blood from dealing with people, their own blood from getting busted in the lip from crowds, and other people who were all banged up, stuff like that. People sweat, their own sweat, dirt, mud. My face was all burnt to hell from the sun. And everyone finally got a chance to kind of sit back and relax. I woke up to ground attack alarms. I went outside, and one of my buddies was holding security outside of the pavilion thing we were in. I was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" He's like, "Hey, a bomb went off at Abbey Gate." And I just remember thinking, I was like, "Fuck." I was like, I hope no one fucking died. I was like, mostly for the fact that I didn't want, obviously I didn't want anyone to be hurt or killed, but also for the fact that I had known the statements that if any service member had been, I knew that if we didn't leave by the 31st, or the 30th, whatever the window was, that we were going to get ransacked by the Taliban that was literally sitting outside the gate just waiting for us. The reports started coming in slowly. At first it was there's 2 wounded, 3 wounded. Yeah, so we started getting in the reports, a couple of guys have been wounded, a bunch of civilians were killed, and then 1 person's dead, 2 people are dead, 3 people are dead, 10 people are dead. The numbers kept going up, and it was just getting worse and worse. And where we were at in that pavilion was right up against where the 2-1 guys were staying. And I remember I got put onto the security. They bumped up the security to 75% after the attack. I just remember seeing a couple of pickup trucks full of gear. I was just reading some of the names, just trying to memorize them to see if that was their stuff. It was their stuff they were packing up, and it was 2 pickup trucks worth of stuff. They had eventually shut off the alarm. It had taken a good while. It was going for a minute. I think it ended up going off a couple of more times. I don't know why. We'd heard the reports about the second bomb. We didn't know where it was. They told us it was like in the same area, but I think it actually ended up being at like a hotel like down the road. We were just didn't know what to do, what was going on. Everyone was starting to get really frustrated and mad, and that was right around the time when they started authorizing for us to just destroy shit, vehicles and utilities and whatever the hell we could get, just smash it, just destroy it, which ended up being kind of good because a lot of guys were really pissed off and really frustrated, and it was a good way to blow off some steam, putting holes in windshields and smashing up radios and things like that. So I think it was like the next day or the day after. The whole time, we had talked about what the egress plan is, and they were like, yeah, we have no plan, no idea how to get everybody out. They're like, we have zero plan. The whole time, the whole plan was just get in and then figure out how to get out later. So there was no plan for us to leave up until like the day we left. Originally, the long-standing plan was because we were afraid that when the civilians saw us leaving, they were just going to bum rush again and just try to do the same shit that they did to the first plane and just grab on. So the original plan was we were going to stack all of our main packs into a pile and burn them, and then just run with whatever we could carry and just run onto the plane. As soon as the last guy got on the plane, the thing would close and we'd just take off. Ended up that 82nd was going to hold final security. They had ended up actually doing a few tricks where they found a storage container full of mannequins, and they loaded the mannequins up with all of the leftover Afghani gear, like the shirts and helmets and stuff, and left them in windows with the lights on and stuff to make silhouettes, and in the watchtowers and shit to psych people out. They pulled out, like, I think a day or two after we did. We got back to Kuwait, and everyone was just pretty. There wasn't a whole. As we spent the first day we got back, and everyone just slept. Everyone just slept and ate food and slept. And in the week or two after that, it was the first 3 days we got back. It was almost silent. Nobody talked. Nobody really dealt with anything. A couple of the guys kind of talked about the shit that they had saw and what each other had seen and dealt with and things like that. And eventually, we started getting ready and getting back to the States. I think we'd spent 2 weeks kind of decompressing in Kuwait. They wanted to send us back on the ship, and we would have spent like a whole another month on the deployment. They ended up saying that it would be cheaper to go on the ship, and then the guys in charge of us basically said, no, it'll be more expensive because now we've got a whole bunch of really frustrated, pissed off Marines that had just seen a whole bunch of fucked up shit. And if you put them on the boat with those loudmouth Navy guys, you're going to have it's be more expensive with medical bills. The guys getting their shit kicked in. So they ended up, at least, I don't know if that's a joke, but that's what they told us. They ended up flying us back, and we got back, I think, 2 weeks early. So we stayed in Kuwait for 2 weeks. And then, actually, I think it was almost a month early. But we stayed in Kuwait for 2 weeks. While they figured out all of our logistic plans. And then we flew back. I think we went from Kuwait back to Qatar. And then from Qatar, I think we went all the way to Ireland. And then we had like a layover in Ireland. That was the first time actually in Ireland we got to have any alcohol. But we had it was only allotted 2 Guinnesses. And I like Guinness, so I just waited till like the 15-minute call, and then anyone who had a second unfinished Guinness, I just chugged it. So I had like 4 Guinnesses in like 20 minutes. So we flew back. Our first sight flying back was actually New York City. That was our first, because we flew up towards Canada, and then we flew back out over the water, and then when we flew back in towards land, we saw like all of Manhattan and everything, the whole city. It felt good starting to come back. And then we landed, I think it was like the next morning. We saw all of our family and everything, and But yeah, I came back home on post-employment leave after that, and after all that stuff, it was like, you'd say, people ask what I did and where I was, and I was like, yeah, I was in Kabul, and they didn't have any idea what the hell I was talking about, even though I saw it like a month before that. While we were there, people freaking out about it, especially after the bombing. Everyone got super vocal about it. And then when I got back and you say Kabul, nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. So it just felt like everyone's interest had already shifted. Before we even really got back, everyone was already moving on to the next thing. So, but yeah, that was kind of the how the whole deployment went, and pretty much a synopsis of my whole career in the Marine Corps. I got out March of 2022, March of this year. So,
damn. Well, I'm just gonna say you fucking killed it so far. You went for like 2 hours straight. I didn't have to say shit.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Went on to the timeline rant, I guess.
No, that was fucking great. I hope every interview's like that. I don't know. I guess just I'll ask a few more questions each, kind of the specifics of some things.
Yeah, sure.
But as far as like training on the boat went, I'm assuming it was just basic everyday training, hip pocket classes that didn't have much to do with anything specific.
I mean, we got lucky because we had managed to get a simulator with us. We had a desktop simulator that we had no idea how to use. Luckily, we managed to get the login information and kind of figure out how to use it. And actually, what was interesting was I ended up getting pretty good at being able to use it. I cross-trained and taught a couple of Royal Marines that we had on the first half of the deployment. I taught them how to do it and things like that. And we narrowed down SOPs, getting more efficient, and I ended up actually working with the scouts and writing an SOP for a call for tow mission for scouts to be able to identify vehicles and hard targets, to be able to just call in, basically do a ATARAC and be able to call in these tows themselves, as long as there's pre-authorization through specific ROEs. So we ended up doing some actually pretty cool stuff. We got access to the ISMIT and got to do some pretty cool weapons training on weapons we never really got to deal with, things that weren't organic. Being able to do some Mark 19 drills and 50 cal drills. We did like pistol shoots and stuff like that in the ISMIT simulator. And so we actually got to do some pretty sweet stuff, but it was kind of just, we had access to a couple of tools, and then we would just get all like a representative from each MOS and just try to work out some kind of training. And then we would try it 2 or 3 times and try to refine it, and then put that in the repertoire of different things we could do. But we would train, and then they would make us read books every day. We'd have all kinds of books that we had to read. There was like a book club, and it got weird at one point. But no, we ended up did getting a lot, and we got to cross train with the LAT guys and snipers, and it got to the point where everyone had done as many hip pockets as they could possibly think of, and it started getting into just whatever the hell people wanted to teach, you could learn it. I ran an armor ID class for the company probably like 3 times, just answering everything, all the questions and stuff like that.
Sound like me.
Yeah, it was cool, but it got repetitive. So, just trying to find ways to make things still valuable to learn.
Yeah, it was the whole LAR debt on the same boat, or were we all split?
No, so we had on the Iwo Jima, we had 2nd platoon, which was the hunter killer team. We had 3rd platoon, which was almost completely new guys. They had some pretty solid NCOs, but most of, I'd say like 75% to 80% of their platoon was guys who were less than 6 months in. So they had basically just hit the fleet, and some of them had been in the fleet for 2 weeks before they got put on the deployment and sent out. So we had some real new green guys with us. And first platoon, they were on the San Antonio, also on Iwo Jima. We had all of our headquarters and logistics elements. Basically, all of our mechanics, all of our chain of command and everything was all with us in the EWO. It was basically just first platoon, and their mech was on San Antonio. So they had basically a party ship the whole time. They were separate from the chain of command, and they basically just did the basic required stuff they needed to, and then whatever they wanted to do. They were mostly made up of more of the senior guys. They were the original guys with us that were the hand-picked senior dudes. So like their most junior dudes had been in for like 2 years. So it was like a big disparity between first and then going to second. Second was pretty much similar to first platoon, where they, everyone had been in for at least like 2, maybe 3 years. And then third platoon was basically all new guys. But yeah, we were mostly all on the same ship, but it was basically just first platoon was on the other ship.
Yeah, I was just concerned about that because when we deployed, it was weapons platoon on the big deck, the Kearsarge, and then the line platoon, all the scouts and the 25s and everybody else, they were on the mid deck.
Yeah,
which I think was the Arlington. Yeah. And
yeah, that was
we were very pissed off about being split up like that. It didn't make any sense to us, and we never got to work together or anything like that.
Yeah. We got lucky on our ship because we were able to kind of cross train a lot. But also, first platoon did have some 52s because they had taken Aikens and Misiak. They were going to be javelin guys, and they ended up not being able to borrow any of the javelin, any of the clues from 1-8. So they ended up getting reclassed to be grenadiers. So it was still nice to be able to have that kind of knowledge out there with them, still some weapons knowledge. But yeah, it was basically just first platoon was out there on the mid deck, and then everyone else was jammed up in the big deck.
And as far as going along with the deployment, I mean, you started getting like rumors and shit, and then I think you covered that pretty well, so I'm not going to go into it as far as how y'all got the word about everything, the situation.
Yeah, it's that underground word, and it's got an accuracy rate of like 5%. And it's always like, well, I heard it from this guy who heard it from this guy who heard it, who's a Navy cook. And it's like, well, how the hell does he know? And most of the time it was always wrong, but on occasion it was right. I think the only right things were like the whispers of Afghanistan, which were really just hopes. And then like, I think that we were going to Sixth Fleet. That was like it. Everything else was like, there was people who were like, yeah, we're going to be in Japan in another couple of months. And it's like, what? But yeah, I mean, it's always like that, though.
I mean, as far as being there on the ground, I mean, I know you went over a couple like stories that stuck out to you while you were there, like the poor old man, the guy's chest blown out by a concussion grenade, and the guy that came in covered in somebody else's blood. Like any other stories, that personal interactions or stuff that really stuck out to you?
I mean, there's a couple. I mean, the problem is like every couple minutes was something new. It was something that stood out to you, and then all the things that stood out just kind of blend together. So like, I could almost not even tell you the timeline of when these stories happened, because it was just one after the other. I mean, we kept having, it was always variations of similar instances. We always had people pretend. A big one was people kept pretending they had diabetes. Like constantly, because they wanted to get drink packets and candy and shit from us. And from the MREs, I would hold on me because my brother's diabetic, so I get it. So I'd have like 2 of the drink packets and maybe like 4 or 5 packets of just the pure sugar. And they're like, he's going to, he needs sugar. I'm like, here you go. And I would just hand him a packet of sugar or a drink packet. I was like, put this in the water, shake it, let him drink it. They'll be fine. They're like, no, we need candy. I was like, no, this will work. This will work better because it metabolizes faster with you drinking it. And they're like, no, we need Skittles. I was like, bullshit. I was like, keep the drink packet. If you need it, you need it. So, and yeah, literally like 1 out of 10 people miraculously had diabetes or some other random ailment that required them to get Skittles or Twizzlers or something. We had one of our guys, Mazaragos. He's pretty well tanned. one of the Afghan ladies came up to him and was like holding his shoulder, and she was like, "This is my son. You have to let me go." And he's like, "Get off me, lady!" Like it was a lot of people just trying to find ways to play the system, and it just turned it. One, we kept telling them to not to. They kept taking the MRE heaters and putting them in water bottles to make personal heaters to go to sleep with them. But then what happens is they make MRE bombs. So they'd be sleeping and it'd be like 3 o'clock in the morning, you hear boom, and like someone would be like, "Ah!" They're freaking out. And then you come over and they're like picking pieces of plastic out of their face, and they're just because it was held up to them like this and just exploded in their face.
That was the first thing I thought of when you said MRE heat water bottle. I'm like, that shit blow up.
And well, the messed up part is they would calm down and stuff like that. They'd find another one and make another one and go back to sleep. And we're like, dude, all right, whatever. Just don't come crying to us when you got a bottle cap in your eye. But yeah, that happened all the time. I mean, you just be walking around just because in the walls we do random security patrols, making sure that everyone inside is still okay. Because not only are we trying to control chaos and stuff, we also have to provide people with safety while they're in. Make sure no one's getting attacked by anyone else and there's no fights and things like that. So we would mosey around at night. It was pretty calm at night. Everyone was tired and trying to go to sleep. And you just be walking around, you hear like boom, and like some other MRE heater would go off and someone would be screaming and crying, and they'd calm down. People trying to huck bags over the wall to other people. You see all kinds of random stuff. But yeah, it was most of the stories you get are like just like shock of people, like just people being in shock. I mean, people come in and they're carrying like their kids dead, and they're just handing them off, and you're just like, I can't do nothing. I can't take them anywhere. I can't do nothing. Like I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to do. Or people just trying to find ways to circumvent the system to try to get on a plane, or everything from begging to bartering to, I mean, people tried bribing us. Literally almost every single person coming through the security tents were trying to bribe us, and we kept having to like literally shove the money back in their hand because it's useless to us. The money's useless to us, and it's not going to affect their outcome. You'd pat somebody down, you tell them to take everything out of the pockets, put it on the ground, spread out, and you're patting them down. You'd feel this like just a brick in their waistband, and like the first couple times it happened, I was like, "That's a bomb." I was like, "This is it." And you'd be like, you'd back up, and you'd be like, "Hey, take that out. What is that in your waistband?" And they take it out, and it's just a stack of like American hundreds, and you're like, "What the fuck?" It's these people's whole life savings that they just put into cash and they're just leaving with. And it was in all kinds of currencies and everything. And, people trying to steal each other's passports. And there was a few times when we actually had legitimate, like, people would show up and they would be like, you could tell because they were like more secretive of it. They'd be like, "Look, I have they should hold up an American passport," and you just be like, "Okay, you stay right there. We're going to watch you. You're fine," and then we'd either find a way to get them to the gate, and they'd hold like a red towel over their head or a pink slipper or something to identify them. We'd get them to the gate. We'd get them through. Or there was one lady, I don't know who she was. I think the Brits were dealing with her, and we had another person that I think it was MARSOC guys. I couldn't tell. They were some kind of special ops, but they were in MARPAT, but I don't know if they were like Force Recon or if they were MARSOC or something. But they were like, "Yeah, we got a VIP coming over. So if you see them, just tell them to wait there, and we'll bring a ladder over and we'll get them over the wall," and stuff like that. So, but yeah, most of the stories, it's just a blur. Like you just kind of, it almost in your mind all happened at once because it kind of did. So,
I mean, telling that story about the lady that was a VIP, they just put out a documentary about all this shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
HBO did. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Yeah.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking maybe that was the Minister of Women's Affairs.
It could have been. I mean, we had right towards the end, we had some big VIP come in. I don't know who he was. I believe he was some kind of government guy. He came in with his whole family, and they were like, "Hey, this guy, he's getting on the next bus out of here. Like he should have been out of here like days ago, and he just showed up." So we were getting random VIPs the whole time. I mean, obviously, so many people got left behind that also should have been considered VIPs. Like because the whole our whole process of getting people through was like Americans and well, it was supposed to be VIPs first. So like government workers, UN personnel, things like that. And in the meantime, we we're also focusing on US, citizens. It got to the point where there's so many different national citizens that we would basically just have a general area of where, because most of the countries had set some kind of military liaison, whether it was like, a team or like a squad of like special forces guys, just to be able to like track them down. And I mean, there were Spaniards, there was the Estonians were there was Irish were there. I mean, they had everybody there, just somebody to there was a lot of Germans. I mean, they had a whole, basically everybody who was in the UN, they had sent some kind of small detachment to try to basically just get their people out, Australians and everybody. We would just have a general area, be like, yeah, like you got to head up towards North Gate. That's where these people are. You got to head to Abbey Gate. That's where these people are. This, that, or the other thing. Or if we had them in our area, I think the Germans and the Spanish were close by us at Eastgate. And if anyone who's German or Spanish came up, we'd be like, hey, get one of those guys. And, they would talk with them. And surprisingly, in my platoon, we had a pretty linguistically diverse platoon. We had a couple of dudes who spoke Spanish, one dude who spoke German. One of the doc for third platoon spoke sign language. So like we had a pretty diverse, and I think a couple of the other guys spoke some other languages. Some people had some basic French and things like that. So we had enough to get everybody by. A couple of guys spoke Russian, which I was actually very surprised that we had that many people who spoke different languages. But yeah, it was just kind of a mess.
Yeah, and just coming back and going home, or I guess just contact interaction. Well, actually, no, before that, while you're still there, any observations or interactions with the Taliban other than them just like driving by and shooting AKs in the air?
Yeah, so there was one dude, I don't even want to call him a dude. He was at Eastgate, and he was kind of, they had a rotation of a couple of guys, but there was one that he stood out the most to us. And they were basically supposed to be like corralling the crowds and keeping them calm. All they were really doing was they were just walking up and down up the barriers and stuff, and just like butt stroking people in the head, whipping people with extension cords and stuff like that. But one of the Taliban fighters decided that he was going to be a little bit more friendly with us, and he came up and I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was our CO or one of the lieutenants. Well, it was one of the officers. And he came up and he was trying to talk to him about the crowds, and he like patted him on the back. And I thought I was about to witness someone dying violently. Like I think he realized that he fucked up talking like that, and he kind of got some space. He kind of like, stepped back. And the only thing, the problem was that we couldn't do anything because they weren't directly killing civilians. That was the only reason why we were allowed to gauge, is if they were in the process of actually about to kill civilians. And they never, all they would do is they would just, at least around us, I don't know what they were doing deeper into the city, but around us, all they would do is they would just beat people with rifles and smack them with, different bits of, whatever they could grab, poles, or there was one guy who had it was like a piece ripped off of a 2x4 that was wrapped in sea wire, and he was just smacking people with it. They would shoot warning shots into the air and shoot at the general vicinity on people stand on top of barriers or cars or whatever the hell. But most of they were working. They were doing their thing probably at any given time 10 to 15 to 20 feet away from us. They knew the limits of what they could do because, they found out the hard way right when we started. I don't think we actually had some kind of ceasefire with them until we had already been there for a little bit. But I think that their higher up command had kind of told them this is what needs to be done for them to leave. So they just kind of, held it together in front of us and basically tied our hands that we couldn't do what we all wanted to do. I mean, you spend how many years hearing about the horrible things that they do and how many of years you spend training to learn how to find these people who hide and fucking take them out. And now he's standing 10 feet away from you, just like waving American M16s in the air. And it's a whole nother level of fucking restraint. Because I know you also know the second you fucking shoot one of them without following the ROEs, you have a horde of suicide bombers out in the fucking city. Well, we found that out after we left, that there was droves of suicide bombers ready to fucking descend on the airport at any given notice. But you can't let what you have going on jeopardize the heart goal of the mission. So if I or any of my guys did anything rash like that, like shoot at or kill the Taliban without following ROEs or anything like that, it would jeopardize our ability to get people out and possibly put us into a much deeper situation where we're taking, in firefights while trying to get people out. So we had to show a level of restraint just for the fact of mission accomplishment. So.
And the guys shooting dishkas at you, like, you think they were Taliban or some kind of off-branch group, or
Well,
like, were they actually shooting at the planes coming in, or was it just like?
There's no way of ultimately telling. I mean, logistically, that's the only thing that makes sense. When we were getting shot at going across the airport, that was still in the early stages of the evacuation, and I don't know if that was when the ceasefire was called. And even if it was after the ceasefire was called, there's no saying that wasn't some hothead young Taliban guy who was trying to get one last punch in at the Americans. Although we were told the highest threat was ISIS because we didn't have a ceasefire with them. And we were also just praying that the Taliban would actually honor the ceasefire and we would be able to do the work we need to do. But there's no way of telling unless internal reports from Afghanistan come out, which will never happen, of who was doing the shooting at the airplanes. It doesn't make any sense that they would. I mean, I'm assuming the random sniper pot shots, if even remotely fired at us, not just like grazing fire at the airport just for the fuck of it. I mean, there was so many warning shots and random shooting going on. I found 2 stray bullets just sitting on the ground. And it's not like it's a rifle range that had been used for, decades and you find a bullet there. Like, it's just an airport that the last 4 days had people shooting. And I found at least one 5.56 bullet and one 30 cal bullet. But at that point, you couldn't even tell who it came from because everyone had the same weapons at that point. There was Americans carrying Russian weapons from the State Department lockers, and there was Taliban carrying American weapons from the captured ANA compounds and things like that. So like you couldn't even tell who bullets were going where because everyone was just shooting the same stuff. So, but yeah, it was no way to tell who it was or what. The only logical explanation from the distance and everything else was that they were trying to shoot at the planes. Because if they could get one plane out of commission on the runway, the whole thing was blown. If they shot one Marine, it would have been a shit show, but it wouldn't have slowed the mission. But if they had stopped the plane or made it so that way it was too great of a threat to the planes and just halted the planes, I mean, that would have been way more detrimental to the mission than, just firing at a random company crossing the airport. So I only assume that they were shooting at the planes, but I mean, you can't ever be sure. There maybe both, but probably not.
The thing I guess I'm most surprised by listening to you is, well, aside from all the stuff going on with the civilians, which I've heard stories here and there, but I'm really surprised by the contacts that y'all took that were inside the airport. Like you said, that RPG team that got schwacked.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that. I mean, I don't know where else you're ever going to hear about that stuff. Because I don't know, the whole attitude surrounding this whole event is just.
Well, I think the big thing about that is because it wasn't contact related to the Americans. They were in the airport, but it was handled by the Afghanis. So those reports never got really sent up because, well, the Afghanis dealt with it, but they had no more chain of command to report anything up to. So they were just, they were basically gunslingers at the airport. They had, I think, one like commanding officer who was kind of like delegating them, and it was literally they were like almost mercenaries, and they were ruthless. I mean, they were shooting civilians just as much as they were shooting Taliban. They didn't care. They were just indiscriminate. Anyone who was causing a problem, they would just shoot them. And they were all just doing it just to get a free airplane ticket out of there. So, yeah.
Well, did any of them get flown out of there?
I have no idea. I mean, I know as the time went on, the ANA Special Forces guys and a couple of the standard ANA guys, they're helping us at first. They were doing crowd control. They were just shooting at the crowds. But a couple of them were working as translators and things like that. But, as the time went on, they kind of started disappearing, and we only really assumed that they were either getting on the planes or they were figuring out some other way to take off. I think a number of the Special Forces guys did stay, and they went on to go fight with the rebel groups. But if they did, I don't know how they would have gotten out of the airport and not been found, because it was just crawling with Taliban and ISIS everywhere, and Al Qaeda was probably somewhere, but mostly just Taliban.
Apart from the one time when they executed that kid behind the building, did you ever witness the ANA directly engaging civilian targets?
Not that I saw. The only I'd gotten reports that they'd mostly done some of that during the initial runway takeover, when all the civilians ran over the runway and the ANA guys rolled in, and that's how they dealt with it. Was they just started running over people and shooting people. But that was before we had landed, so those are reports that I wasn't there for. I had only heard that story secondhand from other guys who were there. So they were. I was still on the defense when they came up and told me that, but I personally didn't see any of the ANA guys shoot anybody. I saw some of the Taliban shooting at families, and some of them got hit, but none that I saw from the ANA.
Yeah, as far as the Taliban shooting at civilians, man, I've heard stuff about that. Just like their version of crowd control, which is dump a mag into the crowd.
Yeah,
whoever gets hit, and the rest just run off. I've heard stuff. Some Taliban intentionally trying to provoke you guys and other U.S. personnel or any foreign personnel on the airport by executing civilians within sight, like not in the immediate vicinity necessarily, but within sight of the airport.
mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I would not be surprised at all. Everyone knew that this was the end, and I mean, we all knew that we were afraid that guys on our side would try to throw one last punch at the Taliban and try to get a kill or something like that. And I talked to some of our guys. I was like, I know for a fact if that's what we're worrying about, that there's going to be Taliban dudes who are thinking the same thing, that they want to throw one last punch at the Americans, but on the way out. So it almost felt like it was also not only controlling the crowds, but making sure that with frustration flaring and tempers flaring and things like that, that everyone had a calm, cool enough mind that they didn't do anything that would provoke more aggressive action. So it was trying to keep everybody calm on all fronts. But yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised at all if there's reports of that happening. I didn't see any intentional executions from the Taliban at the gates that I was holding. We had some people come up with gunshot wounds that were from stray bullets or alleged stray bullets. Mostly just like extremities and stuff. I mean, I'm sure there was plenty of people, because beyond like 30 feet in the crowd, you couldn't get to anybody. Someone could be passed out, just dying right there, and if the crowd doesn't help you get to them, they're not gonna make it. You just can't, because you'd have like 10 dudes outside the gate holding everyone back, maybe 20 if you got enough out there, holding back a road with 2,000-3,000 people on it. It got to the point where they had gotten one of the emergency fire trucks from the runway. They would just fill it up with water. They'd go to the gate and just spray over the wall, over the gate, just to get water on people, because they were dropping from heat stroke so much, just to try to at least help these people out as much as you can. There was the one time it was basically when we had shut down the gate, but not fully shut it down. And we were just doing a rotation of holding security outside the gate and some people off to the side of the gate on the outside of the concrete barrier.
This is the East.
This is the East Gate. They were getting a little aggressive and getting too close, and someone had thrown a smoke grenade at them to try to get them to scare off. And one of them, before it had really popped off, picked it up and threw it horizontally at us. So we're just holding I was all the way on the end, and it had flown past my head, and it actually singed because it had already been going off at this point, and it singed my Kevlar cover, and then smacked into the wall like 2 feet to my right. I didn't even know what it was, because I heard something fly past my head, and real heavy metal sound hit the wall. We didn't know if it was a grenade, a hand grenade or garbage, or people threw piss bottles at us a lot. So we didn't know what the hell it was. So they all backed up, and then I saw it was a smoke grenade. Like, I turned and I saw the red smoke, and I just kind of backed up a little bit, trying to get out of the smoke cloud. But everyone in the crowd just started getting real riled up after that, because they thought we were going to go on a rampage or we were going to do whatever. And I didn't. I just kind of tried to hold my ground, because now I'm the only one holding down a chute with, I don't know, probably 500-600 people just sitting there. I didn't want to bum rush forward over the barbed wire, and they ended up not doing anything. But it was just, I mean, there was that same day, there was on the other side of the sea wire, there was a kid, I don't know, young, 5-6 years old, and he's just standing there, and down the line he's just doing like down to each one of us. And that's like a thing kids do. It's not, I've gone to the grocery store, I've seen kids pretending to be doing that, but it's in the context of the situation, is it just had a whole different feel and vibe about it. A little Afghan boy doing that, just down the line to each person, like, and it's like, it's eerie, it's weird. And
yeah, I remember. I remember doing that shit on the playground when I was.
Yeah, like in any other scenario, it's not an abnormal thing to do or to see or something like that. But just in the whole picture of what's going on, I mean, the kid probably didn't even fully understand what was happening, but it was just eerie and unnerving. It was disconcerting.
Yeah, I mean, that would fuck with me 100%. Coming back home after that, you both just being stateside, being back on Lejeune, going on post-deployment leave and be back with your family. And man, I know you said it was like kind of weird because you try to talk about it and everybody had already moved on to the next thing, or just stuff like that.
Well, I think the other thing too is people for so long have been so desensitized about people coming home from Afghanistan and stuff that, you're like, oh yeah, I'm back from Afghanistan. I'm like, oh, cool. Glad you're back. Like no one, it's like saying that you're home from school at that point. Like no one cares. They're just like, all right, cool, let's hang out. People just don't, they don't, maybe not that they don't care, but they've become desensitized to it. It's like okay, cool. It's weird in that sense because it was such a public thing, especially after the gate attack. It was so publicized and public about what was going on. I mean, there was an hour by hour report on what the hell was going on out there. And I know that because that's what we had to use to find out what the hell was going on, because we had no word from the chain of command. Obviously, the chain of command we had out there with us, they're on the ground too. They're not hearing anything from their higher ups, so it's not even like it's their fault. All the way up to the battalion command, they had no idea what the fuck was going on. They barely even knew what was happening at each gate at any one time, let alone what was going on globally. So,
did they have any inkling of an idea that an attack was pending? Because the reports that I've looked up and seen, 2-3 days before the attack, the Pentagon and CIA are talking about there's an imminent threat from ISIS-K to the airport somewhere. Yeah. One of the gates or somewhere. One of these is being targeted right now.
Yeah, we had gotten it passed down to us about there's an imminent danger and that there's, what to look out for, look for, because like 2 to 3 days before when we had actually shut down Eastgate, that's all we did was we just sat on the wall looking for bombers, basically looking for suicide bombers, looking for VBIDs, looking for any kind of attack. Because basically what the rundown we had gotten is that there's an imminent attack from ISIS-K. We don't know where, we don't know when. We know that they're likely going for mass casualty. So the most likely gate would probably be Abbey Gate. So look for, or the other possibility that they would do is use a VBID, blow a hole in the wall, and then send a bunch of other suicide bombers into the wall and just cause mass casualties inside. So that was the other threat that they were worried about. So we were basically just looking for threats going towards Abbey Gate and looking for possible VBIDs trying to gain entry to the airport and things like that. So we had gotten the reports, but it was so obscure as to what was going on. And like I said before, we had no real perimeter. We just had a concrete wall between us and what the hell was going on outside. And even that was only so effective because people were literally just climbing over it. So we didn't really have any answers for anybody. We didn't have any. We had to sacrifice our bomb shelter that we had that was made out of like concrete barriers and sandbags. We had to take all the sandbags off of it, so there was no kind of IED cover, and we used that to build sandbag walls on top of buildings overlooking the roads, so that way we wouldn't attract any kind of sniper fire or anything while we're up there. And so yeah, we'd gotten the reports, but there was almost nothing other than sending up the information and hoping that higher ups are able to decipher what the hell we're talking about. But yeah, we'd gotten the reports, but there was almost nothing we could really do with the reports other than just look and pray.
It's just, that's one of the shitty bits about the situation is that, like you pointed out, and something I've figured out in doing my research is that there was never a perimeter.
No.
That airport was never once secured, really, by U.S. or any other foreign personnel.
Not at all. No. I mean, we had people jumping into it the whole time. I mean, we had some dude with an AK hop in and start just causing fucking mayhem. Luckily, we dealt with it at the towards the walls and stuff, so that way he never caused any real chaos inside the airport and freaked out any of the civilians or anything like that. But I mean, we'd be taking the service road going around the airport. We had some commandeered vehicles. We called it the bastard fleet. And it was just, stolen trucks and stuff like that, and gators and whatever the hell we could grab, because Eastgate and Abbeygate were miles away from the terminal where everyone was staged. And you'd be in the back of a shuttle bus or sitting in the back of a gator or something like that, and there's these watchtowers that had just been abandoned, and they're just covered in civilians. There's just civilians all over the roof, or hopefully civilians all over the roof, just literally looking straight down into the airport, waving at you, throwing water bottles, doing all kinds of stupid shit. And there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere secure or anything like that. Let alone being in a bowl with no cover and buildings and shit like that. We had just kind of given up on the idea that there was going to be anywhere safe for us. It was just a matter of keeping things at an operational level. I mean, it was as safe as it could be for us. But by the time people were actually getting searched and their bags searched, they were already in the airport. If someone had even a backpack full of explosives, they would have already been in the search tent surrounded by civilians if they wanted to do anything at any time. Everybody had a bag. Everyone was covered in every single piece of crap that they could carry. Yeah, I mean, someone running in with a vest on or a bag full of explosives would not have set off any suspicious alarms until they were already in the airport getting searched. And at that point, it's too fucking late. They're already in the vicinity of countless people around U.S. personnel and stuff like that. So there was no safe area. You were just kind of operating at a accepted level of risk. You just have to understand, this is the best that it can be, and just do what you can with it. We had there was so to try to help us, we would give candy to kids that brought us things that were useful to us. They could bring us like unopened MREs, water bottles, shoes, not shoes really, but like medical stuff, like anything that we can use to help people. They bring it to us. We give them, some candy or some sugar powder or something like that. And at first it was just, they would bring some water bottles and they'd bring some unopened MREs. And then they started bringing us rifles, like AK rifles and stuff like that. And it was turning out because in the mass crowds of people coming through the gate, Taliban fighters were sneaking in with them. And then they would throw their rifle off to the side, like in some trash heap or in the bushes. And they would just walk around in the airport and try to get a gauge of what the hell's going on. And then these kids would see them throw their fucking rifles to the side, and they go pick them up and bring them to us. And now this Taliban dude's walking around in the fucking airport with no fucking weapon. And he would try to get back out and look for his rifle. His rifle's fucking gone. Some kid fucking jacked it for a handful of Twizzlers. And, but yeah, and we're like, what the and it just showed more and more that there was no real security. It was just us hoping on the goodwill of horrible fucking people. That's really what it came down to.
Yeah, that's really the most fucked up piece about it, really.
Yeah.
I mean, on top of all the other fucked up shit.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was a shit show.
Yeah. It's probably one of the last questions I asked, but when you got back to Lejeune and back to LAR, how was stuff there while you were still in?
It was very welcoming. We understood both the privilege of being able to be part of that. I mean, it really was being able to say that you were able to do that, being able to help what you can and things like that. I mean, a lot of people were definitely envious and stuff like that, but everyone was really cool about us coming back. As far as I know, none of the guys coming back really made it a big deal. Like, hey, I did this. It was just kind of like, all right, we're back. Some of the guys would ask questions, and, just kind of chat about it. But ultimately, it was actually pretty smooth coming back. Nobody came back with any grudges or really had any problems. the only thing that it really did come into is there was a smugness about a lot of the guys that coming back, like, I've finally been there, I've finally done that, and that it's like, who's this guy who's been in for 8 years, who's hasn't done anything, and now there's me, yada yada yada. So, but I don't think anything really like came out of that. But I think it was just a little bit of like personal, like, I shouldn't have to take this crap anymore.
Was it mostly younger dudes being like that, or was it
A little
just
bit. I mean,
spread across?
a little bit. It was. I can say for myself, I definitely thought that sometimes, but I try to keep myself in check. I mean, it's still keeping a proper mentality about it. It's like, while I've done that, I've done what I've done. I got to remember that there's a lot of people who've done a lot more than I've done. So really try to humble myself a lot more. And ultimately, I just take it as I just try to take it as like, I'm proud that I was able to represent myself and everyone else I represent, my unit, my country, my branch, all that stuff, and I represented it the best I could. But trying to take personal pride about it, I try to keep just humble about it, because there's always someone who's done more, so I shouldn't think any special kind of way about it. I think a lot of the guys thought the same thing. I know personally, I feel like I didn't deserve to be there, mostly for the fact that there's a lot of people in the past 20 years who've done a lot more contribution to that war, and who have suffered and lost a lot more than I have, for me to close it out for them. But that's how the dice rolled, and it worked out the way it worked out. But there's a lot of times I don't feel like I deserved to be the one to finish out a war that had been going on since I was in kindergarten. So
Yeah. I mean, I remember I was 7 years old, maybe 30 miles from Arlington. And I remember the morning that 9/11 happened. And I remember kids in my class getting called out because their parents worked in the Pentagon or Arlington or up in New York in the Trade Center and all that kind of, and just have it all come to an end. Just,
yeah.
I mean, this is our whole lives that this has been a reality. I mean,
Well, I was gonna say, that was some of the guys that were killed were born after 9/11, so they're literally, their whole life was encompassed by that war.
Yeah, I remember when me and my guys got back from our deployment. On our way back, I looked at Schultz. I think I was like, "Dude, when we get back, we're going to be getting boots. These guys are 18, maybe 19 years old. These are guys that are born in 2002."
Yeah,
like that blew our minds, and it's still. I did a lecture my second semester back at the university. I did a student lecture. And I ask the kids in the class, hey, who remembers 9/11? And like, I think one kid was born like the day after 9/11 happened. That was as close as I got. Like,
I was 5. I can remember being in kindergarten and getting my dad picking me up from school that day. But I mean, even my memory is only so clear as to, back then.
Yeah. I guess just we've been going for a while. I guess just any kind of closing thoughts about your whole experience, whether that's just around Kabul or Marine Corps or anything like that, or really, I don't know, any guys particularly, like, was anybody particularly messed up by everything that went on over there? Or?
Yeah, I won't say any names, but I know there was a couple of guys. I know, I had heard 1-8 had a lot of guys going and dealing with things at the psych ward, and having a lot of talks when they got back. I know a couple of our guys got split up. They tried basically, spreading out the knowledge and the seniority and the experience. They tried spreading it out over the company, and a couple of the guys got kind of spread out a little too far away from their buddies, and they had to deal with some. They started getting into some low points, but I think they all got reeled back in. They realized what they did, and they changed it back and got everyone put back together. That was the extent of it. I still reach out to all my guys. I try to reach out every now and then, just see how they're doing, how they're holding up, and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we all talk about it. There's some days that are good and there's some days that are bad, but I mean, you always kind of at some point in the day, you know, I always kind of think back to something, which is really weird because it was really only 2 weeks, but it was a lot to go on in 2 weeks, and it's barely been over a year, and almost every day something kind of creeps back into my head, but it's being able to share it and getting it out, making it reality, you know, being able to take what's stuck up here and putting it back out there and making it real helps prevent things from getting worse. I found out almost right from getting back to Kuwait that playing the whole, like, the what could have happened game, like the whole what if game, is just a road to nowhere good. It just gets you down into a really hypothetical, you know, it's a hypothetical road that takes you to a really bad, dark place of what could have happened. And it's just more or less accepting what didn't happen, and what did happen, and just kind of taking what did happen in strides and ignoring what didn't happen. And that's really the only way of being able to put all the proper effort where it needs to go, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else you want to say before I close it out?
No, I feel like it's pretty well conveyed, the idea of what happened. And there's obviously, I'm sure I've forgotten or will remember later a lot more of what has gone on, but I guess just a general idea. I've got everything across.
Yeah, I'll say definitely. You, like I said earlier, you fucking killed it. You went like almost 3 hours completely on your own. That was awesome to fucking listen to. Yeah, I mean, if you happen to remember anything that you want to talk about, or if you just want to talk, just hit me up. You got my number.
All right. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, just let me know. And if anybody else, like if they want to contribute an interview, or if they just want an outlet to somebody they haven't talked to before or something like that, just, you have my number, give it to them. And yeah, I'll do my damnedest to make time for them, because I can kick myself is the least I could say. The fact that I can't believe it took me as long as it did to just think of this now. And just, I think about, I mean, the guys that were in my platoon, and I think about guys especially, like I do remember you, the little bit of interaction that we had while I was in, and yeah, just everybody back at the breaks on the ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss it. I miss you. I don't miss the horse shit. I don't miss the bullshit, being treated like a fucking child and stuff like that, which I'm sure you feel the same way, but
yeah, I'd heard, I miss the Marines, not the Marines.
Yeah. But yeah, just stuff like that. And yeah, man, just, I'm here now. I'm here now. I'm sorry I wasn't here before.
Yeah.
But I'm here now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a matter of, you know, I mean, you're already doing more than what, you know, a lot of people have done. A lot of people just kind of would rather just kind of let what they assume bygones be bygones, you know?
Yeah. And yeah. But yeah. Now I can't express to you how much I appreciate this, you sitting down with me, especially for so long and honestly so late at night. And I'm just not envious. I feel like I I don't know. Just like when I heard that you guys were over there, everything I thought about since then is like, fuck. I wish I was there with y'all. I really fucking do.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's guys that deployed with us that didn't end up going. They ended up staying back in Kuwait, holding down the rear, staying with Vicks and stuff. And I mean, even as jokes, nobody even mentions stuff like that, just because it's people get beat up about it. They beat themselves up about stuff, not being able to go and not being able to do things. And it's no fault to them, but there's also almost no way of avoiding that feeling. So
Yeah, it's just. But I'm glad you're back safe. I'm glad the boys are back safe. I'm glad everybody back at LAR at the very least is back safe.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just I don't know what else to say other than to thank you.
Well, I should thank you for being able to, interview and be able to sit down and talk about it. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. If anybody else wants to talk, if you want to talk again, just let me know. Yeah, but I won't hold you any longer. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, yeah. I'll hit up some of the boys, see if anyone's down to also do interviews.
Also, side note, I'm digging the stash, dude.
Oh yeah, yeah. I actually just trimmed it down a bit. It was like way out to here like yesterday.
Yeah, I can tell a little bit.
Yeah.
Looks good though.
Thanks, man.
No problem.
All right. Well, I'll keep in touch with you.
All right, man.
All right.
Stay
Take
safe.
it easy.